Olga Khazan, welcome to Interinteract. I know this is your first salon, and I think we've been talking about this for such a long time. I think I first emailed you when you were still writing the book, and you were like,
Yes.
girl, you need to slow down. I have to first finish it, and it has to be edited and going to print. So we've been waiting very patiently. In the meantime, you published several articles on the matter in The Atlantic, where you work, kind of approaching the different angles of personality change. And now the book is out, but better, The Science and Promise of Personality Change. And your first book was called Weird, which is so fitting, I think, for your personality and for your explorations. I'm a quadruple immigrant at this time. I'm in Manhattan right now. And my first thought when I read the book was that, oh my God, this is an immigrant book. These are immigrant worries. Like, we want to fit in. Like you say, I think
Mhm.
in one of your Atlantic essays, like, I will do whatever you guys want. Just
Yeah.
know what you need from me in the kindergarten, and I will be that person. Like, we are all Zelig.
Yeah.
Do you maybe want to start there and tell us your story a little bit? Because I do think the Weird book, which is about being an outsider in an insider world, and then this one, which is about how much can we shapeshift, basically? Is
hmm
is this even a worthwhile effort or a completely hopeless endeavor? These to me feel deeply immigration related. Is it just that I'm a hammer and I see nails everywhere, or is there some truth in this?
Yeah. So I am an immigrant. I'm from Russia, and I grew up in West Texas, which is sort of the jumping off point of my first book, which is just the unusualness or the weirdness of that. And then I talked with other people who were sort of different from everyone else around them. Um, and I think that that sort of contributed to a large extent, my introversion, which was one of the personality traits I was working to change. It was really hard for me to make friends as a kid, because of sort of just the natural friction that existed between me and other people, because my family was just so different from everyone else. And I think that sort of I carried that with me into adulthood, even though now I am pretty much indistinguishable from any American, I think, and I don't have an accent and I like all the same stuff Americans like, but I still sort of like whenever I'm kind of approaching someone, I'm like, oh, are they gonna think something about me that's like not quite true because of my name or because I'm, foreign or something. Yeah, I think that did contribute to like my like sense that like, oh, I'll just stay in tonight. I don't need to talk to those people. I don't need to go out. I don't need to like meet new people. They're not gonna like me anyway. It's gonna be awkward. So yeah, I think there is sort of a through line there now that you pointed out.
I mean, Texas, I mean, some parts of Texas are really like the capitals of norminess, right? The
Yes.
Joneses and being thrown into that milieu. I just had Sarah Hayter on my podcast, The Hope Axis, who is also from Texas. And you're not just moving to America, right? You're moving to a place where a completely different register of conformity is celebrated and sought after. So it's kind of heroic, no, to stay yourself, however hard. You do write in the book about this trade-off. Am I
Yes.
fit in the social cost of being yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think where a lot of people get stuck, yeah, people, there's like a quote that's like, Texas is America, but more so. And I think that's totally true. So people often think like, social connection, it's good. It is good. It's great for our health and well-being. It's a positive thing to have a community and to feel socially connected. But it can be hard, and any introvert who's ever tried to fit into a group knows this feeling well of like, how much do I keep inside? How much do I like keep to myself or how much do I sort of share? How much do I put out there? How much do I say whatever the group will want to hear versus how much do I just kind of be myself and express exactly what I think. And there is a real trade-off to that. Deborah Tannen, one of the kind of sociologists that I write about in that chapter, really like dissects a dinner party that like in excruciating detail in a book from the I think 1970s. And it just is very clear how people have completely different expectations of what should be talked about, how to talk about it, how often each person should talk, how loud you should talk, whether you should interrupt. And so all of these things can make it a lot more challenging to be an extrovert.
I love Deborah Tannen. She was one of my inspirations for Interintellect, which comes from, I mean, it arose from a linguistic project. My original background is screenwriting and playwriting, and I have a linguistics degree as well. And, for a very long time, I just wanted to write fiction. And then when the world fell apart 10 years ago, as a political immigrant, it rang a bell for me. And I thought maybe I should work on real people going forward. So Interintellect's origin is a very Tannen-esque one, whereby we try to find some kind of a common ground because we bring together complete strangers on the internet every day to talk about some of the most difficult topics. And we've been doing this for 6 years and we had zero incident. So it
Hmm.
seems to be working. Thank you, Deborah.
Yeah.
She's our godmother. And Mira Strober from Stanford, who does this through the academic angle, right? How to bring together very sensitive Quaker theologians and Chicago school economists in a fruitful discussion so nobody runs out crying. And it's never the Chicago school economists, right? Do you buy into the weirdo normie dichotomy? Is this something that for you seems scientifically robust?
Weirdo versus normie. I think everyone is a little bit weird. I honestly do. I haven't like met a person. I think that this is something I used to think is like I'm so complicated and like deep and everyone else is basic. But really I think everyone has like a little like quirkiness in them. I don't know.
I hope so. I hope so. Yeah, when you were talking about how you were like everybody else in America, I thought, really? I mean, one just has to like open an article you wrote, and that illusion fades immediately, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
And there is this world. So I don't know how much the attendees are familiar with the Big Five, which is kind of the still the most replicable way of testing personalities. I know DJ, you're here and you're an MBTI fan, and I'm sure we will talk with you about the Myers-Briggs as well, which is a more intuitive approach to it. The Big Five obviously consists of the five core traits of humanness, openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. And Olga, you are one of the many people who have extreme values on certain
Yeah.
here, right? And what the thing that bothers you the most, if I remember correctly, is the introversion and the neuroticism, right? So low extroversion, high neuroticism.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you maybe want to talk about why you've singled out these two qualities of yours for change? It's so curious to me, right? I mean, all five seem to be there for probably evolutionarily beneficial purposes. You very kind of intellectually humbly talk about the positives and negatives of things, like too much openness might not be a good idea. Too little neuroticism probably gets you killed in a road accident very quickly. So why was it this duo of these two traits that you attacked with your various methods throughout this research process?
Yeah, so you're right. Everyone is on a spectrum of all five traits, right? So no one is like, I'm a total extrovert. I mean, you might have scored 100, but that's like pretty rare, right? Most people are somewhere between, 10%, 10th percentile and 90th percentile. So it's true that like some amount of each trait, even the negative ones are good. Anxiety, for example, is a good example. You do need anxiety to get up and go in the morning. Like you need anxiety to show up for work on time, to get done all those tedious adult things that we have to do. What you don't
The
want to
whole
happen,
alarm clock is about to induce anxiety in you, right?
yeah,
Alarm clock like rests on the notion that every person will get up.
right, exactly. Like if you have no anxiety, you would sleep through your alarm clock because you're just like, I wonder what that is. So you do need some anxiety. What you don't want to happen is for anxiety to take over and for it to actually make it so that you don't take action and you aren't able to move forward. You aren't able to make decisions because you're so trapped in the cycle of worry that you can't actually break out. So that's where neuroticism goes too high and you want to bring it down. And so for me, the reason I focused on those two, I also did a lot of work on agreeableness, but I kind of started out in the middle on that one, and ended up in the higher middle, but it wasn't as extreme of a change.
That
So
was the gratitude journaling one. That's
that was the conversation workshop and the
oh,
anger
when you had to
management.
go to strangers.
Yeah, yeah. So for me, introversion was keeping me really socially isolated, and not in the sense that like, finally, like I get quiet time to myself to relax. It was sort of like I only ever got quiet time to myself to relax. I never like did anything else. Like I only ever relaxed quietly by myself. And I realized that I just needed more people in my life. Like I didn't have a community or a village or anything like that. And then as far as neuroticism, it was just kind of like stealing my happiness. Like good things would happen and I wouldn't be able to appreciate them because I was so obsessed with but how is it actually bad? You know, how is it not quite what perfect? Or what's the next thing I need to be worried about? I was obsessed with sort of finding the negative in every positive situation. And I wanted to kind of appreciate what I had and be able to savor the positive moments that do happen. Because when you look at what happiness really is. It is kind of living from happy moment to happy moment. There's not some magical future where we're all going to be happy 100% of the time. It's really happy people are happy in the moment that things are happening. And so you really do have to learn to think about circumstances differently if you want to be happier.
One of the most striking things in the book is at the beginning, somewhere, I think it's in the intro, you mentioned that 90% of people want to change at least one aspect of their personalities.
Yeah, that's right. Mhm.
How did this strike you when you found out about this?
Well, it's interesting because as I've been working on this project, people by and large do not get it. Like they're like, why would I want to change my personality? Or like, why is like, do you mean like with a stroke or like, getting a like metal bar through the head or something? So I think it's an unusual concept, but if you think about it, personality sort of encompasses almost everything about you. So any kind of change that you make would be a change in personality. If you get really organized, that's a personality change. If you get less anxious, that's a personality change. If you start being nicer to people around you, that's a personality change. Yeah, I've found that people often do not immediately get what personality change is, but then once they start talking about what they would like to change about their own lives, what they're actually talking about is personality change.
We had a James Clear on Interintellect.
Mhm.
I think it was 3 years ago now. Oh my God, 3 years ago. And he was talking about, I mean, his whole thesis, right, for Atomic Habits is that you have to become the kind of person who acts out every day. It's an identity question. And he also draws from Buddhism.
Mhm.
He went and so beautifully explained the Eastern Europeans' astonishment to find out that there is this plasticity when it comes to the entire notion of the self. But I loved in your book also that you warn against some of the extreme kind of new age bullshit that we might, wrap these quests in. Before after my next question, I'm going to like stop for a moment and we will open it for the audience so that you guys can ask questions. But one thing that really kind of bothers me in this whole thing, and this is an immigrant's observation, because the more you move, the more you realize that this varies from place to place.
Mhm.
That every culture seems to have a set of desired traits, right? And it's like you're talking about Dale Carnegie, you're talking about the smiley culture. One of my favorite pieces in The Atlantic actually draws on research to show that this whole smiliness comes from the monolinguistic encounter of an immigrant country where
Mhm.
people were not able to talk with their neighbors, right? But in America, everybody wants to be extroverted, agreeable, but not a pushover.
Mhm.
And, but is that really good? Do we want
Yeah,
everybody to be the same?
right. So, in the sense that, like, looking individually, is it good? What the research has shown is that for the most part, being high but not too high on all five of those, and by that I mean high in emotional stability, not neuroticism. So low in neuroticism. I'm sorry, this is so confusing, but they put one bad one in there with four good ones, so I always have to explain. Okay, so you want to be low in neuroticism and pretty high in the other four. And that is sort of associated with well-being. What do we mean by well-being? Success in school and work, good physical health, good mental health, good family life, low divorce, like generally satisfied with the direction of your life, longevity in some circumstances. So if you want those goodies, it does tend to behoove you to be in kind of higher on those traits. As far as whether we want all of society to be like Ned Flanders, and just very like chipper and agreeable and all that. I mean, I think we're a pretty long way from everyone achieving that. Like, I think it's like pretty unlikely that everyone will adopt the exact same personality to the exact same degree. We have a really, really long way to go before people are there. I would worry less about everyone suddenly becoming too conscientious and more about like not enough people doing it actually.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's quite interesting to me. I mean, I'm Eastern European. I spent almost 30 years in Eastern Europe, and it's a super disagreeable culture, right? And
Yeah.
agreeableness is not really, I mean, unless you're at some very specific level in the hierarchy in a corporate culture, nobody wants you to be agreeable, right? It's a really interesting thing. And then you go to, other cultures, and that kind of kindness and servility, at least on the surface level, is greatly, greatly valued. So that's really interesting to me. Any questions in the room? I'm just going to give a moment to raise your hands or ask anything in the chat. Trey, you left a comment. Oh, okay. That you're reading the book at 2.3 time speed. DJ.
Yeah, so I haven't read the book, so this is an uninformed, maybe this is all entered in the book. I guess it's really two questions. So the first is like, to what degree is this, this change you've gone through, or that you think others have gone through, how much of it is just getting older? Right? I mean, in the sense that I'm 57, I never thought of myself as that anxious when I was younger, but as I got older, I realized I actually was anxious. I just didn't have a name for it. And I learned to just kind of let go of it. Some of it's through meditation, some of it's through medication. Um, and I'm just a lot less anxious person now.
Mhm.
And it's hard to say how much of that is wisdom versus just not having as much testosterone, flowing through me. Um, so I'm wondering, so first of all, how much of this is, truly sort of a cognitive effort on your behalf versus just getting older and having more life experience. And then the other, this is sort of a different question, but um, I'm convinced that politics is mostly about personality. Um, and in particular, not so much the big five. I mean, I guess the big five would also map onto it, but I'm thinking in particular, I do Gretchen Rubin, her book, The Four Tendencies.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I don't know how scientific that is at all, but it was a very interesting thesis. And in particular, the one type there's four different types, and they all have strengths and weaknesses. One of them is the rebel, right? The
Hmm.
person who's instinctively is contrarian on everything, right? And I have friends like that. If you like a movie, they hate it. If you like a musician, they tell you why they suck. And I feel like that's a big part of our politics. Is there's a cohort of people who are just reflexively like, whoever's in power sucks, I want the other guy,
Hmm.
or gal. So anyway, just throwing those two things out there for you to respond to.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, and I was just taking notes so I don't forget all your points,
Mhm.
which are great. Yes, so everyone changes as they get older. Yeah, personality change happens as you get older, even if you don't try to change. Actually, one of the changes that you highlighted, which is lower neuroticism or lower anxiety, that's a total part of getting older. Everyone gets less anxious. Almost everyone gets less anxious and less depressed as they get older. They also get more conscientious, so something to look forward to for all of us. What my book is about is more, it's called volitional personality change. So it's actually research that's been done on how you can kind of like change faster than you otherwise would. So everyone is kind of on the same trajectory, changing over time. But this is more about activities and habits and practices that can change you in various ways in a shorter period of time, usually over the course of a few months. Most of the research that has been done has shown results after about 10 weeks or so. Um, and again, lasting for several months afterward. So that's kind of the difference there. And then as far as politics, yeah, I mean, I think personality plays a huge role in politics. There's one pretty significant finding, which is that one of the big five traits, openness to experiences, is highly low openness is highly correlated with being a Republican or being conservative. Comes up over and over and over again. I did not like make this up. I'm not like trying to attack anyone by saying that. I'm just over and over, people who score low on openness come out as highly conservative. Now that those studies were mostly done before Trump, and I do wonder how much of the Trump phenomenon is kind of what you're saying, which is sort of a like screw everything, burn it all down kind of mentality, which is more like the rebel kind of personality that Gretchen describes. One kind of twist I would add on to that is that there's like a element of disagreeableness about that movement that I've noticed, especially coming from the officials, which is sort of like this, almost like I don't know, how do I put this? So agreeable people are very like warm and fuzzy. They are bleeding hearts. Like they care about everyone and they don't want to deport people and they want, everyone to have housing and they want like good things for like all the people. And you could say that that's not realistic, but that's like what their motivation is, And so I don't see a lot of that um out of the Trump administration. So I would argue that there's a low agreeableness element there. But that's just my gloss based on what I'm saying.
Well, I think also inside every agreeable person is a disagreeable person who's like, I wish I had told that guy to go to hell instead of, you know, and so Trump is sort of a proxy for that, he's the one who'll tell them. And also just more broadly, like David Axelrod says, when he was doing consulting, when he was evaluating, whether to work with someone, he would ask himself, does this person want to be somebody or do they want to do something? And if they want to do something, I'll work with them. But if they just want to be somebody, I won't. And Trump strikes me as the classic. He just wants to be president. He just likes being president. Yeah.
That's
Anyway.
Interesting. Yeah. I quote David Axelrod in the book if you need another reason to pick it up.
I'm thinking of two things. One is that, I mean, we have this classic arc of the rebellious son settling into a more conservative Republican or equivalent in whatever country as they age because their openness kind of hits its peak and then lowers. But also like Michael Pollan's book, I mean, you talk about psychedelics in the book. His whole thesis in How to Change Your Mind is that psychedelics should be taken in like middle age and older to counterbalance. First of all, because that's when you have stuff to process. I mean, most people, that's when you have accumulated so much life experience and so many memories that it becomes an actual issue to live with them in a very functional way and remain open to experience and emotions and other people and novelty. And like that's when you should hack your brain. I mean, of course, there are beautiful examples of like young people over, surviving horrible traumas. And for them, a lot of new therapies are very promising. But for like the average Joe, it's when your first grandchild is on the way is when you should drop acid, according to Pollan. So just a thought. Before we go, and I want to talk a little bit about some of the methods that you enumerate in the book, from being more extroverted via just spending time with more extroverted people or just different people, to some of the activities that you try. From improv, I love all your jokes, but your joke of like, I didn't understand how somebody would go back to improv multiple times and then you become that person. I think it's hilarious. I've never dared to do it. So I have a huge respect for that. Do you maybe want to talk a little bit about these methods that you tried or some that maybe you didn't try because they looked way too suspicious and
Oh, yeah.
low
Oh, what did I
promise?
not try because it looked too crazy? Oh, good question. Well, I actually didn't really do a big dose of psychedelics for this book. I didn't do psychedelics at all for the book. I interviewed people who did do psychedelics and I read a lot of the research on psychedelics. I think it's really promising stuff, especially for trauma. Or if you're working through something and nothing seems to be helping. There really does seem to be something about them that helps you see your problems in a different way, through openness, basically, through that personality trait. I do think that that's super promising, but kind of the boring answer there is that I just couldn't get my hands on psychedelics in a legal way. um, uh, and didn't want to like do something kind of in a back alley because I wanted it to be kind of legit. Yeah, so among the things
And
that I
then when you
tried,
get caught, you're like, this is for science. This
I
is
know,
for
I know, I know.
research. I'm writing a book. You don't understand.
I'm kind of a wuss about stuff like that. I can't really relax if I feel like I'm gonna get in trouble, or I don't know. It's just not really pleasant for me. I did try improv though, and that was surprising because I thought I would really hate it. And I did really hate it for the first few months that I did it. But what's interesting about it, and this happens with a lot of different types of change, is that the more you do something, the better you get at it, which is pretty obvious, including really daunting things like improv. And as I got better at it, I kind of started to update my conception of myself. I had always thought that I was the kind of person who would not ever do improv because I would surely not be good at it. But as I did it more and more, I started to incorporate this like good at improv Olga into my own identity and sort of like, oh, I'm someone who does improv. Like that's what I do. This is part of my life. And because at a certain point I'd been doing improv for like a year every week. Like that's someone who does improv. And so I thought that was a really a good example of how this process works in that you kind of like update your internal software program with whatever it is that you're doing. So you want to be sure that those updates are positive and what you actually want to be like, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And also, it kind of brings us to the great question of traits versus roles. You talk about, first of all, there's a beautiful kind of almost spiritual background to improv as a science, right? From John Stone to the founders of Second City, like these people thought about personalities very seriously, as like Meisner and Stanislavski and the great dramatic acting coaches. But it also brings up this great role, to go back to Zelig, of role playing, and how many people kind of choose a role, like your mice in your story who all pick up some, everybody tries to be indispensable in the tribe, and so you pick some role among the Smurfs so that you can be the strong one or the cook, but then we get stuck. And you talk, I mean, one of the pieces of research that you process is just the science of being able to switch between roles, right? Like you can be, I don't know, funny with your parents and serious with your coworkers and loving with your spouse, and that's fine. Why do you think I mean, we seem to be living in the most liberal era in history. Why are so many people struggling with being stuck in a role, often that they chose for themselves, right?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, so there really is this theory of it's called free trait theory, which is sort of what you described, that as we face different demands, we can kind of adjust our personalities to match that. So this is someone who's maybe super introverted, but their job requires a lot of public speaking. So they kind of learn to like flip a switch and become extroverted for a night or two or however long it takes to do this public speech. Um, and yeah, so that's one way that we can kind of shift to accommodate different roles. But I will say that personality is not just the role that you're playing. It's also what's going on cognitively. So especially for things like neuroticism, it's something that's very internally focused, and it's like how you're thinking about your circumstances. There was a lot of times, or there have been a lot of times, there still are, when I'm like acting totally normal, like to my coworkers, to everyone else, but inside I'm like completely freaking out and melting down because I'm having, a freak out panic attack about something. And so that's also part of personality, and that's also something that I wanted to change, is that um, sort of the internal monologue that runs alongside the external kind of mouthpiece or whatever you're doing.
I love it. And I'm seeing quite a few comments in the chat about improv. So I'm just going to stop for a moment. Guys, jump in about improv. How did you end up there? How was it, Emreen, Trey? We want to hear from you.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure if my audio is working. Apologies, I joined a little bit late. I had a dental emergency.
Oh no. Are you okay?
I'm fine.
You
It's all
sound
good.
great.
It's all good. And my face is not frozen, so it's all good. Yeah, my comment about improv is mostly to do with I personally I said no to, I've been sort of performing as a dancer in group activities all my life. So I was comfortable as long as there were other people with me on the stage. I just felt like I could get through it. But as a solo performer, I always used to go, absolutely not. I do not want everyone to be looking at me for any reason whatsoever. But I guess into my adulthood, I've been trying a lot of things out of my comfort zone, and improv and acting classes was one of those things where, an acting coach, depending on whichever school of acting or methodology they subscribe to, your acting teacher will make you say like one line like 50 different times, right? And it was really surprising to me because it's instinct. You don't have that time. It's like you have a second to like get it out because there's like 50 students in the class. They don't have the patience to go like, why don't you sit there and like think about it for 5 minutes? No, you're on the spot. So you have to get it done. I think it really sort of like jolts you out of your cerebral sort of landscape and just puts you back in your body where you just have to react by instinct. And I think that's why it worked really well for me and I really enjoyed it and I highly, highly recommend. I see some of the other people in the comments, they said they've tried it. So I'd love to hear their thoughts as well, like how they felt about it.
I did it, and yeah, it was great. My dog's getting loud. I'm not a very quick-witted person. I wish I were one of those like Jon Stewart types who can just you know, or Conan O'Brien. But nonetheless, it was still I mean, I remember we did like our final, I did it over the course of several weeks. And then we did like a performance where we invited all our friends. And, I made one joke that just killed. And, I'll remember that forever, like that one moment, the one time when I thought of something funny to say. And then the acting class, I did a Meisner style acting class, and I really liked that. That's almost like therapy all by itself. It's it's a very intense and just sort of mind expanding style.
Wow.
For those of you who don't know, Meisner is different from Stanislavski in that it focuses on the partner, right? So you always have two people on the stage and you enact an entire scene just repeating the same word at each other, right? Or you change the word. Like it's almost like a
You observe.
hypnotic relationship between two people for an extended period of time. And it kind of like locks all these relationships or unblocks all these relationships.
Yeah, it's about observing the other person, getting out of your own head and reacting to what they're doing. So I might say, "Oh, you're holding your chin," and you would repeat back, "I'm holding your chin." And I would say, "Oh, you're smiling."
Yeah.
And like that just sort of takes you in all kinds of interesting directions.
Wow.
It seems like improv, and this is, I think, why it's so, it has such a weight in the story. It doesn't just, ease up the introversion. It kind of eases up everything, right? It allows you to be a different person.
Yeah, I really recommend improv for people who, like me, struggle with giving up control. So in addition to just helping you, it's like fun and it's like a fun activity and it keeps you on your toes and you have to be creative. But it also like you start to realize that you have very little control over the situation. Like you have to just kind of surrender and let things happen, and which can be very uncomfortable. But also you kind of learn that like often that works out okay. Like other people will jump in and rescue the scene and like help move it along. Like you don't have to do everything, which is it's nice if you're used to doing everything. I don't know. I recommend one improv class for everyone. That's my prescription.
I love it. I only did the Meisner. I never did the improv, but I love watching it. Was there any method that backfires in your experience? I mean, you write a little bit about how annoyed people get when they have to gratitude journal for too long. You know, there is some literature now about how therapy can backfire. Some people become more depressive or more stagnant because of therapy. What was your experience about this when it comes to personality change?
So one thing that did not help me is this technique from Judd Brewer, who overall I think is like very smart and I actually think has some interesting points. And in particular, he talks about worrying as a um, sort of as a coping strategy that doesn't work, and or like an obsessive almost like habit. And I think that is very true. But his solution to this is to do this thing called noting, which is like when you are feeling anxious, you're supposed to like think or say one word about like how what's going on in your body, like tingling, clenching, like think or like thinking or like buzzing, like little words to describe your bodily sensations. This was not helpful to me on any level. I also could never remember to do it when I was anxious, and I am not totally sure what it was supposed to accomplish. Like, I have to just be honest. Like, I don't, maybe I was doing it wrong, but I, first of all, don't feel anything in my body when I'm anxious. And then, second of all, I like when I am like truly like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, I'm not going to be like tingling. Like, like I just don't remember to like
Hmm.
think a weird word to myself. Yeah.
That's so interesting. So one of my closest friends in back in Budapest is an onco-psychologist. So she works with
Mhm.
patients and doctors, nurses, and family members. And she does a lot of autogenic training. And
Mm.
I mean, there's some similarity here, but in autogenic training, it's certain feeling you kind of consciously train your body to associate relaxation in specific or from specific feelings with a keyword. So you
Hmm.
almost become like a Pavlov's dog that whenever a certain type of negative emotion comes up, you kind of like hypnotize yourself with that word, and that really works.
Hmm.
So maybe it just doesn't work when it's like something really random. But I would never try that. That I've never been angry and thinking like I'm going to say tinkling, and that would like
Yeah, yeah, I don't know. Maybe it works for other people and just not me. I don't know.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about agreeableness. I think this is one of the maybe most misunderstood of the traits. Um, I'm a hyper disagreeable person, so this is also like my personal quest. I don't want to change it. I'm fine. You know, it's like being
You think you're disagreeable? Why?
I mean, based on tests. Yeah.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
like being a nuclear power state. You just don't use it, you know? You
Okay.
have
Okay.
it.
Okay.
You don't want to be forced to use it. No one has to know. I mean, they have to know because of international treaties, but you know,
Right.
other than that, and but because of this, I feel like, and because I work in tech, which tends to attract really high openness, low agreeableness people with a very varying range of neuroticism.
Mhm.
Um, but this is kind of the big mystery to me. This is also where I'm the most wrong. Like whenever I try to guess somebody's agreeableness level, it's never like when they take the test, it's not even close. It's like there's always like a 50-point difference between my guess and wherever they score. How do you relate to this question? I know you're in the middle, so maybe you see both. I'm in the middle for extroversion. I'm exactly 50-50-0-0, so it's perfect. Um, do you feel that agreeable, like, did you find out something new about agreeableness? Is agreeableness even the good name for this? Should it be cooperativeness? I have so many questions about this.
Yeah, so for me, I started out like kind of in the like low to middle, like medium low. Then I dipped down to low. And then I went back up to like medium high. And
That's
for
when you
me,
became, you changed yourself a little bit, and then that kind of subconsciously made you trust other people less.
I think I think so. I don't really know what happened, or just I had a really bad week and like yelled at a bunch of people on Twitter or something. And like honestly, getting off Twitter did wonders
Oh
um
my God.
for my
I thought
agreeableness.
at first I thought it was my cycle when I first did the test. I thought, oh, I will do this in 2 weeks again because maybe I was like an asshole today, but maybe this is just, yeah. But no, in 2 weeks it was the same, so it didn't matter.
So for me, a lot of the disagreeableness that was really bothering me was my anger levels, and specifically my anger at my now husband, then boyfriend. And the reason is that I was deciding whether or not to have a baby, and I really didn't want to have a baby in an angry home. Like I didn't want there to be a lot of yelling and fighting between us if we did have a child. And I really wanted to work on this. I was like, I don't know what to do with my negative feelings toward him if not yell. Like I don't know another way of resolving problems other than yelling. And one thing that I kind of came to understand through all the stuff that I did on agreeableness is that really like the reason why some people are good at not yelling is because they have a ton of empathy for the other person and what they're feeling. And I just really did not, or I didn't even try to. So a good example would just be, I would tell my boyfriend to like look up houses on Redfin, and he just wouldn't do it. And I'd be like, he's lazy and he doesn't respect me and he doesn't respect my time. And I would scream at him. And what I came to realize is that he actually didn't want to move houses. Like he liked our current house. So he didn't want to move, and that's why he wasn't looking up houses. And I think it was just kind of finding that like often when someone is doing something inexplicable that's making me angry, there's usually like a secret reason for it that I am not considering might exist. And that once I uncover the secret reason, the behavior will make a lot more sense to me and will make me a lot less angry. So that's something that I don't know. I guess it was like it seems kind of obvious maybe, but it was a big breakthrough for me.
Interesting. Guys in the room, any experiences with the agreeableness in yourself or other people? But anger as a score is part of
It's part of neuroticism, yeah. But for me, it was just like the most visible. Like agreeable people don't tend to get angry. It's just like it was like the most
Yeah,
visible element of disagreeableness.
that's so interesting. For me, it's always a matter of trust. I don't
Hmm.
trust agreeable people because I think they will say whatever they think I want to hear. When they know me too well, they can figure it out, right? Or if they're very highly empathetic. Whereas a disagreeable person, I know, like I'm a disagreeable person, I will say what I think. And, if I say I like you, that's 100% true. Like there's no like
That's
small
interesting.
print.
So what's interesting is that honesty is part of agreeableness, but people have different um, ideas of what honesty means. And I think some people, in some cultures, it's more important to be honest, even if your opinion is negative or bad. But I think that's like not true at all in America. Like I think you're not really supposed to be honest if your opinion is like something the other person doesn't want to hear. It's actually better to be dishonest, which is confusing because you are agreeable being agreeable by being dishonest, which doesn't
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
align. But I was hanging out with a friend who's Chinese the other day, and I do have a baby. We did surprise surprise go on to have a baby, and uh I was hanging out at her house with my baby, and most people are just like, he's so cute. Like they're just commenting on it. And she was like, oh, is it normal for his head to be so big? Like, and I was like, yeah, it's like a big head, but it's normal. And she was like, are you sure? Because that's a very big head. And I was like, yeah, it is. I don't know. it was interesting. Like I just know she's like a lot more blunt than a lot of like Americans that I know.
I love it. I loved it that there's towards the end of Veep, the TV series, when the Finnish head of state, a woman comes and she's like, she's Finnish, so there's no filter. She like
Hmm.
talks about her vagina and like very uncomfortable things at like state functions. And the Americans are trying to somehow keep a straight face and pretend nothing is happening. I remember a cultural study where they like tried to have different groups from different countries to conduct a business meeting, and they had to arrive at some kind of shared understanding toward the end. And I think the lowest common denominator was between Israel and Japan.
Mm.
Like there's nothing in common in communication styles between these two
Oh,
groups.
I could see that. I could see that for sure.
I wish I could have been there. I love watching presidential debates from different countries. So, you know, you watch the American one and you think that that's tense. And then you watch the French one where even the moderators are like shouting, you know, really, really, really tense. And they are very smart. I mean, Macron is a very smart guy, but it's like really, really like at 10. And I think in Israel, they actually like stopped doing presidential debates because it's just somebody going and shouting into your face up close. I don't know. It's not. It's
They came to
not,
blows.
yeah, it's not very enjoyable for the viewers. You had to be there. Emery, you have your hand up.
I just have a quick question for Olga. I'm sorry I haven't read the book because I just joined. I literally like 2 days ago, but I plan to. Um, where do you think the line is between agreeableness and just people pleasing behavior? Because I feel like I and a lot of my social circle, people would describe me as very agreeable, in most situations. But to the people closest to me, for example, my family, I also have an anger issue, like serious anger issues, because when I feel disappointed, when I feel like no one's listening, and I asked for this multiple times and no one seems to care, it's totally up to me. And also because I kind of grew up in a very patriarchal culture in India, and rage just comes built in, I think, in Indian families. So what do you think, where do you think is the line, and like how do you differentiate between those two behaviors?
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting what you said. I do think we learn a lot of agreeableness from our parents and from our like home culture. So I also like Russian culture is very angry. I don't know a different way of putting it.
Nobody was
Like
ever confused about what a Russian person is thinking. Like
yeah,
it's never a mystery.
we're like yeah. Yeah, I was talking to my dad today on FaceTime. My husband and I were, and he was like giving us some parenting advice, and he's like, "Well, you know how it is. It's like either the whip or the pastry." And he's like trying to say like whatever, carrots and sticks, but like it's like the whip or the pastry. Anyway, yeah, so the line between so a fear of being a pushover is a reason why people don't want to become more agreeable. So very, very few people like choose agreeableness as the trait that they want to work on. And the reason is exactly what you say, which is that they fear becoming a pushover. I talked with a friendship like mentor for that chapter, and she made a really good point, which is that like the way that you develop good relationships without just doing whatever everyone tells you to do is through boundaries. You really have to specify to people what you are willing and not willing to do. And you have to say it like kind of firmly and kindly and possibly say it like multiple times. I have a friend right now who is in a really bad situation and doesn't have a car and is like um she just has like a lot of needs right now, and I've really had to be like, okay, I can drive you from here to here at this time. I cannot always do that every Wednesday. Like you kind of have to be very specific about what you're willing to do. And initially it could seem a little bit disagreeable, like, oh, why can't she just do whatever I need? But over time, like that helps preserve friendships because you're not always putting yourself out and then feeling passive aggressive or even angry.
There's a name for the imply and the ask cultures, right? Like say you have to move and your friend has a car, there are the imply cultures where you're supposed to read between the lines, and then there are the ask cultures. And when it's the bad match,
Yeah, yeah.
the boundaries might not even be, you know, perceived by the other person.
We don't have boundaries in Russia, so yeah, this was a new thing for
Yeah.
me.
But it's interesting because I'm also thinking about like my family and the Indian family's rage, and all of my Indian friends will talk about this very specific like entrapment in social situations. And I mean, you talk, Olga, in the book and in the surrounding articles as well about anger being kind of an unmet expectation, right?
Mhm.
Agnes Callard has a wonderful book called On Anger, where she talks about how anger is almost like a realization that a social contract has been broken, that I thought that you and I have the same understanding about the world, and now I found out through some small thing that I think now that this is not true, and whether that's real perception or not. And it seems like boundaries, like cultures with more boundaries somehow seem to provide people with more realistic expectations eventually, and then there's less anger.
Yeah,
You see the
yeah.
connection? Does this resonate in the room as well?
Yeah, I totally think that's true. I mean, boundaries are really, I think a lot of times we get into trouble because we think that the rules of a relationship are self-evident, or that we can never establish new rules once we're in a certain pattern, or that things don't need to be said. But a lot of times things do kind of need to be said. Like people don't always know what you're thinking, and it can lead to hurt feelings if you're not more clear. And I'm not saying you have to do this in the most blunt, rude way possible, but there is a way to do it gently, but also just to stick to your guns.
Thank you so much. I love Lily Shirless, the young journalist, and she has a wonderful piece I'm going to share in the chat about what we mean when we talk about boundaries. I'm on a quest now to have her on Interintellect. My Gen Z head of operations is obsessed with her as well. So we're like, I'm trying the millennial way, she's trying the Gen Z way, and we see what happens. Maybe she will be like, these are too many generations. Get involved. We'll see what happens. But I'm so happy that you brought up the friendship mentor. I mean, such an American idea, right? Pickup artists and friendship mentors, friendship coaches, intimacy coaches. I don't even know what else exists. I recently heard about EA for polyamory people, people who want to have the spreadsheet for sleeping around, but they don't have the time to make them. You know,
Oh, like a assistant for that? Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah, we'll organize your Uber and everything. But I want to talk a little bit about the friendship question, because this seems to be very important in almost all the five aspects of the personality. Do you maybe want to talk about your quest to make more friends as an adult, and how did you go from what you call a hermetic existence to being an almost extroverted person, indistinguishable from Americans?
Yeah, so yeah, indistinguishable from. Um so the friendship mentor is Canadian. Not American,
Billy,
but
we're looking at you. I'm going to throw the mic at Billy in a moment, because I was like, when we were talking about agreeableness, I was like, we have a Canadian in the room. I mean, at least one. So at some point, you guys have to come forward.
so yeah, so the most effective way I found to make like one-on-one enduring friends, I did make a friend this way, is through this app called Bumble, which most people use for dating, but also has a friendship side, which is only for friends, like you don't date on it. But it's a very similar process. You go out to coffees with people and you like hang out with them, and then if you have a good time you see them again, and you kind of progress through to like movies and drinks and dinner and stuff, and it is kind of awkward. I've actually never online dated, so this was my online dating experience, was this Bumble BFF thing. And yeah, it works though. I mean, it's good if you live in an area or with a lot of people who are similar to you, because realistically, most friendships are built on a lot of similarity. Not necessarily like um I mean, it has to be like at least like lifestyle and values and things like that. But kind of more similarity, like hobbies, things you both like to do. Like the more similarity, kind of the easier it's going to be to get the friendship going. Um, so yeah, it's a good way of finding people around you who are like you who are, might want to be friends. Yeah.
Was there how many bad friend dates happened before you found the one?
I went on one really, really bad. Like, okay, there was only one that was so bad that I like ran to my car afterward.
What
Um,
happened? I
oh
wanna
God. I
know.
honestly think maybe I should have given her another chance. Okay, it was really cold that day, and she didn't drink, and she wanted to be. We both wanted to be outside because COVID was really bad at the time. And so she wanted to get ice cream, but it was like cold, so we were like eating ice cream in the cold. And because it was an ice cream place, there was like a ton of kids running around and just like around the table and like making noise. And I was like, so you're an accountant? Like kind of like eating my ice cream, like freezing. We had nothing in common. She was an accountant, uh, and just I don't know, like didn't like offer a lot of like interesting thoughts or like anything for me to pivot off of. And then one thing she said that really I felt like I just couldn't get past is um she was single and sort of like not dating anymore, and which is fine, but she was like I was like, why aren't why did you make that decision to be single and to not date? And she's like, well, all women peak in high school. And so it's unlikely to ever find anyone after high school like that you like actually like and who likes you. And I was like, that's the saddest thing I've ever heard in my life. Like I was like, I'm Russian and that's too bleak for me. Like I was like, people get married when they're like, 50 or 60. It's not true that women peak in high school. So I don't know. I think I just was not it was not the seeds of a bosom friendship.
Oh my God. I mean, just leaving, I mean, what Emrin you also were talking about and DJ, like just leaving your comfort zone exposes you to so much fun also, especially if you don't have to be stuck in it. I love the story where the anger management class on Zoom, has this crazy guy who always says the same stuff, like this Debbie Downer character, and eventually the anger management teacher gets angry. Like this should be in a comedy. Like this is hilarious. Um,
That guy was really funny, and I actually really appreciate him because everyone else was like being hedgy, I felt like. And he was like, no, I'm really angry. Like, this is what's making me angry. Everyone is like pissing me off. Like, no, like, don't tell me to take deep breaths. And I was like, you know what? This guy needs to manage his anger. He's in anger management for good reason. And like, this is good. Like, he's being honest. Like, I don't know.
And you just like drop there that you are the only person in the room who's not court mandated to be there.
Yeah, it was true. It was true.
Really, really
Court
nice.
mandated anger management class.
Any adventures in the room about friend finding? In adulthood, obviously, like this is part of my job. I run Intersect, and a lot of people fall in friendly love with each other, or romantic love. We have multiple marriages. The third Intersect baby is about to be born. So a lot of people, make adult friends, in at our events and in the community. But I would love to hear from the attendees if you have any stories about just successfully won adult friendship recently.
I have one. I was waiting if someone else wanted to go. So I make a little bit of content on social media. I don't do that as much anymore, but initially when I started, I would get like a lot of messages from people just, appreciating a comedy video that made me laugh. I was having a really shitty day and, it was just, yeah, funny and thank you for making me laugh. But I found so many people through social media where I know it can be a little bit, finicky, right? Because there's all kinds of people on social media. But one of my best friends now is I met her through social media because I was trying to get into indie filmmaking, and she's an established movie editor. So she's just sort of like offered her services, like, oh, love to meet you, love to get to know you, and 2.5 years later, we're like besties now. We've worked on multiple projects
Oh,
together.
wow.
Yeah, I just I think I feel very lucky because I feel like I don't know, we all at some point after we've graduated college and like adulting and all that, we just feel like we're not going to be able to find new friends anymore. And surprisingly, that has not been the case for me. And I feel very grateful for that. And that's actually one of the motivations for me for joining this wonderful platform as well, because you can never have too many friends, right?
That's awesome. I love that.
I never bought into this social media will stop you from making friends or it's somehow eroding. I get that, like, of course, in excess, everything is eroding. Like, but I remember as an elderly millennial, I remember a time before social media, and it was really much harder to stay friends with people. It was like if you went to a different school, you lost that person. And I think there is something to, I mean, Billy is in San Francisco. I'm in Manhattan. We've been friends for a very long time, right? And we have access to communication if we need it. And I think there is something about both the ease of making friends and the stability of friendships when you use technology well. And we need to talk more about it. It's all just like doom and gloom out there whenever we talk about social media. I think there's a lot of upsides to that. Another story that was, I mean, probably the most one of the most famous stories that you were talking about is Dan Harris's journey from having a live panic attack,
Hmm.
in the style of a grimy 1970s, media critical Oscar-winning drama, to becoming a guy who's 10% happier with really hard work.
Yeah.
And you can say that, oh, it's just 10%, but actually, that's quite a lot. Do we want to talk a little bit about Dan and what happened to him and how that inspired you?
Yeah, Dan was a big inspiration to me. So Dan Harris was a anchor on Good Morning America weekend. And he at one point was doing so much cocaine. This is all in his book, so I'm not sharing anything that anybody doesn't know. He at one point was doing so much cocaine that he had a panic attack live on air. And first he quit the cocaine, which is great. But also he started meditating. And he started meditating like a lot. Like he meditated for my book. I did a class where I meditated for 45 minutes a day. He meditated, I think, for like several hours a day at his peak. Um, and I just found that there was so many similarities between me and Dan because the journalism industry is so competitive that it really can feel like everything is make or break. Everything is the highest possible stakes. You can't slip up even a little bit. It's all riding on you, like in your abilities. And I don't know, I felt like he really, like when I read like a Buddhist monk's memoir or like when I read like Pima Chadron or someone, I love those books and I think those people are really smart, but I don't really relate to them at all because I never aspired to have that life and I like don't care about being a successful monk. Like but I do care about being a successful journalist. And so that's why Dan's I don't know, a lot of his like little lessons and takeaways I really internalized. Some of them like the one from David Axelrod I quote directly. So I um yeah, like I was never a French anarchist. Yeah. I don't know this person, but they're yeah. Anyway. Um
Yeah,
but yeah,
just
I
share
like a
that.
lot
Yeah,
of the Buddhists
this
are
big
they're like,
perspective.
and I never strove for anything again, but like I'm gonna strive for stuff. Like I have to like find a Buddhism that works for someone who has aspirations and like has desires. And so that's really what I liked about Dan's work.
That's my big qualm about, the Stoic trend in tech amongst men, but also Ozempic and the class of drugs, because they seem to be attacking not just the addiction centers of the brain, but about the attachments and the desires as well.
Hmm.
And it's an interesting thing to imagine, an even more sedated citizenry in the future with even lower kind of cravings. Once again, it's going to be a trade-off, right? We are going to lose something with it. Yeah, the link I shared, she's very popular in Interintellect. It's a originally French Buddhist teacher called Martine Bachelor. It's a couple. She's the wife. And she was a very stressed anarchist in the 60s before she discovered Korean Zen. And I love this text because it's one of the best examples of writing about meditation in a very psychedelic way. So what she describes happening in her mind is very similar to what people on hallucinogens will describe. Um, I want to kind of like bring the conversation to the question of gradual change and how permanent the changes are. But before we get there, one thing that I was wondering about as I was reading the book is like which of the five is the most stubborn, like hardest to
Ooh.
change?
Okay. So
Which
we
trait?
don't totally know. People don't try to change agreeableness very much, and it seems pretty hard to change because it's um externally, like it's based on how you treat other people, not like, whether you're getting up on time and getting in the car on time and stuff.
That's interesting. Except the
Um,
pickup artists, right?
right. But they're not agreeable. They're just manipulating you so they can get what they want.
Yeah, but do you remember like in Magnolia, there are these scenes when they teach the nice guys to not be in the not be friend zoned and how to be like more aggressive and like less empathetic with the woman.
Oh.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. I guess like that's lower agreeableness, but I mean, you probably weren't very agreeable to start with if it's that easy for you to like treat people like that. But yeah, so agreeableness is really stubborn. Neuroticism is also, I found it really challenging. Like extroversion, I felt like this is great. This is like an amazing thing. Like I should party all the time. And then with neuroticism, I really found it challenging to meditate, to not obsess about career and status as much. Yeah, I like neuroticism was challenging for me.
Why is that? Is it the more biologically encoded thing than the other ones? Or would you have to change the environment to change it?
I think for some people, including for me, neuroticism can be a tool, right? Like anxiety um, can almost feel like it's keeping you safe. Like if I'm always anxious, I'm always like sleeping with one eye open, then nothing can ever hurt me because I'm always on alert, right? And so it can be really hard to let go of that mentality. It's also one where it's almost entirely internal. Like no one's gonna like everyone will see you at parties or at improv or whatever, but like no one's gonna see you working really hard on being less anxious. And so you're kind of just gradually trying to let go of these beliefs that you've held on to your whole life and that in some ways have probably served you and served your goals and your aspirations. So I don't know. To me, that one was really, it was almost like a shift in how I approached life rather than just, I'm gonna do these 10 things every day and be different.
And if we have somebody in our lives, I think we all do, who just struggles with their own neuroticism, how can we help them? And what is something we should not ever say to a neurotic person?
Oh, great questions. Okay. It's really hard to change someone else's personality. You really have to want to change. I'm sorry, I know this is so like well trod at this point, but it really is true. I mean, you could like encourage them or like say, hey, you don't have to be so, have you considered medication? Have you considered therapy? You could like give them options, but the person has to want to change. Um, what to never say. I've had a lot of people tell me like just stop thinking about it or just stop worrying about it or like just relax. And I'm like, if I could, then I would. Like the whole problem is that I can't stop thinking about it. Like there's something about my brain where like the way I self-preserve is to keep thinking about it. And um yeah, I don't know. So I wouldn't, that's not helpful to me.
I have a good friend who went to therapy and therapist told her just stop being depressed. She was like,
Done.
oh,
Problem
that never
solved.
occurred to me. Thank you so
Good
much.
job, therapist.
Yeah. She never thought about this option. It was so helpful to hear that. You said this thing that I never thought about, but I think this is really, really an important question about the desire to change somebody else's personality. And I think we all kind of have this desire sometimes, and maybe more often we want to change other people than how often we want to change ourselves. Is this a completely hopeless thing? Should I like stop my little ongoing project? I'm half joking. Or I mean, I definitely have been changed by other people. You also so beautifully write about your marriage and how, your spouse's loving gaze made you look at yourself in a more loving way as well. But you were not very successful with loving kindness meditation on the other hand. So what works and what doesn't work when it comes to changing other people's personalities? And what if that other person is a child?
Yeah, I mean,
Related.
so yeah. Okay. So for kids, I mean, the thing about kids is that you can completely control their environment, right? Like you don't determine a kid's personality, but you determine like what school they go to and who their friends are and how they spend their time and how much do they read and if they witness something stressful, how do you react and how do you explain it to them? So that's kind of why parents do shape their kids' personality, at least, while they're under your roof or like under your ability to control them. Um, uh, but with kind of like grown adults, I mean, you can do something called motivational interviewing, which is basically like trying to figure out if like someone's actions are getting them closer to their goals. And so if someone's like, I want to live long enough to meet my grandkids, but they're smoking like a pack a day, you kind of start to ask questions about whether they think that smoking a pack a day is getting them closer to ever, meeting their grandkids and spending time with them. And like eventually they'll come to the conclusion that no, but then actually quitting the cigarettes is like still on them, right? Like you can't do that for them. So there are things like that's kind of what I was saying is like there are things you can do to nudge people in a certain direction, but you ultimately like change is really hard and it is continual. And so the person has to do it themselves.
And once again, there's the expectation management there, right? And I think good therapists and good coaches will kind of explain to you that there's only so much they can do. Before we go into the last section, I just want to stop for a second. If there are any questions in the room, Billy, Ellen, we haven't heard from you yet. If you have any comments, any questions, now is your time. Or if you just want to say hi. No? We respect introverts here in Interintellect. Be yourselves. And also introverted days and extroverted days and whatever mood people are in, it's completely fine. The last section I would love to devote to the gradual change and the idea that, we all change gradually as we age. Everybody's big five moves in very similar directions, but we retain the relativity of the starting position, right? If you were hyper extroverted as a child, you will still be the relatively the most extroverted in the old folks' home when you're trying to like hook up your two neighbors with each other before they die.
Yeah.
It's like as people do. And some traits get worse, right? Like some very high disagreeableness people, very high introversion people can become more so if left untreated. But you frequently raise the question of how permanent these changes are, if they are sped up, and if they are did in a very artificial and controlled way. How should we think about this? How from 1 to 10, how hopeless is this endeavor in your findings through your research?
So they've only most of the studies have only followed people for a few months after the experiment. So the experiment itself lasts like 10 weeks or 12 weeks, and then they'll check in like 3 months later or something and be like, are you still different? And they're like, I am. And like the people around them will be like, they are. And then the researcher kind of moves on. Why don't we follow these people for longer? Because they're just haven't been long-term follow-up studies. This whole area of research is very new, and then following subjects for long periods of time is very expensive and also rare. Like there's not a lot of studies that follow people that way. The kind of anecdotal research that we have, like there was this book called Quantum Change that I write about, shows that when people have some sort of like epiphany, like I'm changing my life today, I'm quitting drinking, I'm gonna go tell that woman I love her, like that kind of tends to last a lifetime. So they followed those people for years later, and they found that they were still doing whatever it is they had like vowed to do at that time. But we just don't know. And I think a lot of it depends on what you decide to do after you've changed. So it can be a little bit like weight loss, right? So some people lose weight and then they gain the weight back. Did they ever lose weight in the first place? Like, yes. Okay, so are they different now? Like, you know what I mean? Like it's kind of like it's hard to tell what um how to describe someone who regresses back or who kind of goes like this, maybe like they lose weight and then they gain weight and they lose, and like undulates through time. So, but some people lose weight and then they keep it off forever and then they become total health nuts and they work out every day and they like drink the green juice or whatever else. Um, so some people's personality change is like that. It kind of just depends on how committed you are and how well it works for you. So I'm sorry that it's not a very satisfying answer, but it really is different for everyone, and that's the answer that I got from like the people who study this.
I think that's the most satisfying answer. And the whole quest is about, having a little bit more control over who we are and knowing that a lot of it is up to us. At least for me, that's a very comforting thought. If somebody embarks on this long journey of gradual change, and they really, really keep to it, they go to improv and then they stay in improv for a year until they become the person who does improv. Or they become more sociable, they get married, they decide to have a child, they move to a different environment where a different side of themselves is being kind of called upon on a daily basis. Or they get a dog, and they become more caring. Like there are so many ways we can hack it. How can people keep track of this?
Yeah,
Right.
so
I myself get used to every new thing I come up with, and then 2 days later I forget that I was never like this before. Should people journal? What do we do?
you could journal. You could take photos. I did the super nerdy thing and took personality tests at personalityassessor.com. And that'll actually track your tests over time and show you how your trait levels fluctuate over time. Um, so you can do a number of things, but most people have a good sense of who they are and also who they used to be. There was one interesting study where they asked people, did a life event change your personality? And people were like, yes. And what was it? And they said what it was and how it changed them. And then they actually did have personality tests for those people that they had taken every single year of that study. And so they went back and looked at the year that that life event happened, the researchers did, and they found that their personality scores actually did change in the way that that person remembered changing. So people do have a really good sense of who they are and who they've been over the years. Um, so it could just be a matter of like making note of that or, stopping and thinking, huh, I would have reacted to this totally differently a few months ago, a few years ago, what have you.
And this also goes back to changing lives, right? I mean, I think a frequent frustration with therapy is that sometimes you feel that this person should just quit the job or get a divorce, and instead they're just talking about it. Of course, this is like very reductive, and sometimes this is the case, and sometimes they really just need to talk about it. But we are talking about very dynamic lives and dynamic personalities where it's not just the personality that doesn't become stagnant, but your life. And to kind of trust yourself that if you're thrust into a different situation, a different scenario, you will have to adapt, and we do adapt to it, right? I remember also this study that was very much everywhere around 15 years ago, where they were supposed to be showing how in 18 months, whatever happened to you, your happiness level goes back to the same level. And I think we're kind of debunking that. I think people are learning that that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah, I mean, but what I do like about the personality change research is that it does kind of suggest that there aren't opportunities that are off limits to you or challenges that are off limits to you because of you're just not like that or you're just not meant to be that way. Because you can adapt, you can rise to meet challenges that come at you. And I don't know, I think that's really inspiring. I don't think I would have become a mom had I not done this as I was thinking about becoming a mom, because I didn't think that I was like meant to be one or that I had it in me.
That's beautiful. And a last question. Oh, Billy has a last question. Okay, then mine will be the last after the last.
Oh, sure. Yeah, kind of like going off of what we've been talking about recently. I had a question on if you found anything, either like in the research or like personally around this idea of like identity change. And what I mean by that is like I've heard one way people talk about behavior change as like one way to make it stick is to like change your identity about like, oh, I'm the type of person that does this new behavior,
Mhm.
and that helps make it stick a lot more. Um, so with like, losing weight, right? It's like, okay, I become the type of person that like prioritizes, you know, maintaining healthy weight or something like that. So yeah, I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts or like findings were around that, and like sort of, you know, does one thing come first, or is it like a kind of a building, uh, like a sensation or something?
Right. Yeah, I get what you're saying. So I would say the behavior comes first. Like you have to see yourself doing the behavior in order to convince yourself that you do that behavior. But I did notice that the people who changed their personalities most successfully for the long term did have an identity component to it. So they would like start going out more or start reaching out more to friends or start taking on more leadership roles at work, and then they would be like, I am the kind of person who takes on leadership roles. And it helped kind of push them toward the next thing because a lot of them are going to feel challenging, and you are going to feel I think someone mentioned imposter syndrome earlier. And it's a good way to get over that hump if you feel like this is in me, like this is part of who I am.
I really believe in the epiphany point that you made, Olga. I had maybe like two, three of them in my life, and they completely changed me. And one of them actually was around the time when I started the Interact, when this exact thing happened. I just felt that the world was on fire, and what I thought about myself didn't matter at all. Like it was just like not no, we were no longer in the realm where people's personality types matter, and it was about what you do. And anybody can do things, right? It doesn't like we are all capable of contributing. I wanted to ask you, but we're running out of time. If there is anything about the long-term effect of COVID on personality change that can fit into 1 minute, I definitely want to hear it. If not, please tweet at me because it seems like a collective trauma, right? So maybe we had a collective epiphany. Because on Twitter, the productivity boys turned into teapot. Everybody started doing mushrooms, got a bunch of tattoos, joined the polycule for a while, great resignation, emotionally at least. So what is it a collective thing? Are we just recovering from it?
I think COVID made people a lot more introverted, possibly still to this day. I think it really, yeah, it dampened people's like willingness to go out and talk to people because there was a very real risk of sickness. So it's understandable, but I think it like reprogrammed our brains for like the medium term.
It was less than 1 minute. Olga, you're so good at this, explaining a really, really complicated international psychiatric event in a few seconds. Guys, this was a joy. Olga Khazan, you're the best. I loved your book. Read Weird and read Me But Better. It's very thought-provoking. I'm sorry, DJ, we didn't talk about MBTI enough, but we can continue on the Discord. Good night, everybody. It was such a privilege to spend time with you, and thank you for bringing all your experiences and questions and the really good performance in the Zoom chat. I'm impressed. Olga, I hope you had a good time.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you all so much for coming. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.